Shalom, my friend. You believed, nothing happened. You planted seed. The ground was empty. Faith was never the issue. Something deeper failed. I am Rabbi Shimon, and what I am about to tell you will disturb every assumption you have made about why your life remains unchanged despite your sincere belief. You have been told that faith moves mountains. You have been taught that believing is the beginning of transformation. You have accepted that the seed of truth, once planted in the heart, will inevitably produce the harvest of a changed life. This is a lie, not because faith lacks power, but because you have confused the seed with the soil. Before we go further, understand this. Insight without inspection changes nothing. I created the vessel inspection protocol to help you identify where structure is leaking. It is free, linked below. If you skip it, you are consuming, not building. The seed is not enough. It has never been enough. And every day you continue believing it is enough, you remain trapped in a cycle of sincere failure. Listen carefully. The problem is not your faith. The problem is not your sincerity. The problem is not your knowledge of truth. The problem is that your life has no governance. You have spent years accumulating seeds, truth upon truth, insight upon insight, revelation upon revelation. Your mind is a warehouse of spiritual inventory. Your heart burns with sincere conviction. Your intentions are pure as mountain snow, and yet nothing changes. This is not an accident. This is not bad luck. This is not the enemy attacking your progress. This is the inevitable result of believing that planting seed in ungoverned ground will produce a harvest. Governance is not belief. Governance is not faith. Governance is not sincerity. Governance is the structure that contains and directs the power of what you believe. Without governance, faith leaks. Without governance, truth evaporates. Without governance, sincere intention becomes spiritual masturbation. You want to know why you are the same person you were 5 years ago, despite consuming enough spiritual content to transform a small nation? Because you have been planting seed in sand. Sand cannot hold water. Sand cannot contain nutrients. Sand cannot support sustained growth. No matter how precious the seed, no matter how perfect the planting technique, no matter how sincere the expectation, sand will always produce the same result. Nothing. Your life is sand, not because you lack faith, not because you lack knowledge, not because you lack sincerity. Your life is sand because it lacks the structural integrity to contain and channel the power of what you believe. Governance creates that structural integrity. Governance transforms sand into soil. Governance provides the container that holds water, nutrients, and the delicate environment necessary for seed to become harvest. But you resist governance. You avoid governance. You postpone governance. You negotiate with governance. Because governance feels like restriction. Governance feels like limitation. Governance feels like death to the spontaneous, emotional, feeling-driven life you prefer to live. And so you remain faithful and sincere and unchanged. This is why men prefer belief to order. Belief feels powerful without requiring submission. Belief feels transformative without demanding discipline. Belief feels spiritual without imposing structure. Order demands submission. Order requires discipline. Order imposes structure. And structure feels like prison to the man who has confused freedom with chaos. You have confused freedom with chaos. True freedom is not the absence of boundaries. True freedom is the presence of the right boundaries. True freedom is governance that creates space for authentic expression rather than governance that restricts it. But you do not want authentic expression. You want unlimited expression. You want to feel free to choose anything at any moment based on any impulse for any reason. You call this freedom. It is not freedom. It is slavery to the chaos of ungoverned impulse. And chaos cannot sustain growth. Chaos can generate excitement. Chaos can create temporary momentum. Chaos can produce powerful emotional experiences, but chaos cannot sustain the delicate, consistent, long-term process required to transform seed into harvest. Growth requires seasons. Growth requires rhythm. Growth requires the steady, predictable, boring consistency of structure operating underneath the spontaneous creativity of expression. You want the creativity without the structure. You want the expression without the consistency. You want the harvest without the seasons. This is not faith. This is fantasy. Faith understands that God operates through structure. Faith recognizes that divine power flows through divine order. Faith submits to the governance that creates the container for power to be contained and directed rather than dissipated and wasted. But you have been taught that structure kills spirit. You have been told that order opposes anointing. You have been convinced that governance is the enemy of grace. This is backwards. Structure serves spirit. Order channels anointing. Governance is the vessel through which grace flows into practical reality. Without the vessel, grace remains abstract. Without governance, anointing remains emotional. Without structure, spirit remains theoretical. You want practical results from theoretical commitment. This is impossible. Practical results require practical structure. Theoretical commitment produces theoretical results, which is to say, no results. Your life demonstrates this perfectly. Years of theoretical commitment. Years of emotional experiences, years of sincere belief, and the practical reality of your daily existence remains fundamentally unchanged. This is not a character flaw. This is not spiritual immaturity. This is not lack of faith. This is the predictable outcome of trying to build practical reality on theoretical foundation. The seed you have been planting is not theoretical. The seed is real. The power contained within the seed is real. The potential for transformation locked inside that seed is absolutely real. But real seed planted in theoretical soil produces theoretical harvest, which is to say, no harvest. Your soil is theoretical because your governance is theoretical. Your governance is theoretical because you have never submitted to the practical disciplines that create practical structure in practical reality. You prefer to believe that believing is enough. You prefer to feel that feeling is sufficient. You prefer to hope that hoping will somehow magically bridge the gap between theoretical commitment and practical reality. Hope is not a bridge. Feeling is not foundation. Believing is not building. Building requires materials. Building requires tools. Building requires skill. Building requires time. Building requires the willingness to work within the limitations imposed by physical reality rather than the freedom offered by mental fantasy. But you do not want limitations. You want possibilities. You do not want disciplines. You want options. You do not want structure. You want spontaneity. And so you remain perpetually planted and perpetually barren, perpetually seeded and perpetually fruitless, perpetually faithful and perpetually unchanged. This is not God's plan for your life. This is your plan for avoiding God's governance over your life. God's governance feels restrictive because you are accustomed to chaos. God's governance feels limiting because you are addicted to options. God's governance feels boring because you are entertained by possibility rather than committed to actuality. But actuality is where harvest grows. Possibility is where seed rots. You have been rotting seed for years. good seed, powerful seed, seed with genuine potential for transformation, but seed nonetheless rotting in the ungoverned soil of your undisciplined life. And every time the seed rots, you blame the seed, you question the power, you doubt the potential, you wonder if transformation is actually possible. Transformation is possible, but not in ungoverned ground, not in unstructured soil. Not in the chaotic, spontaneous, feeling-driven environment you have mistaken for spiritual freedom. Spiritual freedom is not the absence of spiritual discipline. Spiritual freedom is the fruit of spiritual discipline. Spiritual freedom grows in the soil of spiritual governance. But you resist spiritual governance because you misunderstand what governance means. You think governance means someone else controlling your choices. You think governance means external authority dictating your behavior. You think governance means surrendering your autonomy to become a robot. This is not governance. This is control. And control is the counterfeit of governance. True governance is internal. True governance is chosen. True governance is the voluntary submission to structure that serves your highest good rather than your immediate impulse. True governance asks not what you want right now, but what you want most. True governance chooses not what feels good today, but what produces good tomorrow. True governance serves not your momentary preference, but your ultimate purpose. And your ultimate purpose requires structure to become reality. Your ultimate purpose needs governance to move from intention to manifestation. Your ultimate purpose demands the container of discipline to hold and direct the power of your potential. But you prefer potential to manifestation. Potential feels limitless. Potential feels powerful. Potential feels spiritual. Potential requires no sacrifice, no discipline, no governance. Manifestation feels limited. Manifestation feels practical. Manifestation feels ordinary. Manifestation requires sacrifice, discipline, governance. And so you choose potential. And potential without manifestation is masturbation, spiritual masturbation, the self-stimulation of possibility without the penetration of actuality. You have been spiritually masturbating for years, stimulating yourself with visions of who you could become rather than submitting to the discipline of who you must become. Who you could become is fantasy. Who you must become is destiny. Fantasy requires no governance. Destiny demands absolute governance. But you do not want absolute governance. You want selective governance. You want governance that governs the areas of your life you already control, while leaving ungoverned the areas where you lack control. This is impossible. Governance is not selective. Governance is comprehensive. Governance covers every domain, every decision, every moment. Partial governance is not governance. Partial governance is preference disguised as principle. You prefer to believe that you can govern your spiritual life while leaving your practical life ungoverned. You prefer to believe that you can submit your heart while retaining autonomy over your habits. You prefer to believe that you can surrender your intentions while maintaining control over your implementations. But heart and habits are connected. Intentions and implementations are inseparable. Spiritual and practical are one reality viewed from different angles. Govern one, govern all, or govern nothing effectively. You have been governing nothing effectively. You have been creating the illusion of spiritual governance while practicing practical chaos. You have been planting spiritual seed in practical sand, and you wonder why nothing grows. Nothing grows because growth requires integration. Integration of belief and behavior, integration of faith and practice, integration of spiritual commitment and practical discipline. You have kept them separated. You have made spirituality abstract and practicality material. You have created a dualism that prevents integration and therefore prevents growth. This dualism is not biblical. This dualism is not spiritual. This dualism is the philosophical foundation of your continued failure to transform despite your continued commitment to truth. Truth is not abstract. Truth is practical. Truth is the integration of spiritual principle and practical application. Truth without application is philosophy. Application without principle is technique. You have philosophy without technique. You have principle without application. You have seed without soil. And seed without soil produces nothing except the frustration of unrealized potential. Your frustration is not accidental. Your frustration is diagnostic. Your frustration is the signal that something fundamental is wrong with your approach to transformation. What is wrong is simple. You have been trying to transform your life by changing your beliefs instead of governing your structure. Changing beliefs is easy. Governing structure is difficult. Changing beliefs requires mental energy. Governing structure requires practical energy. Mental energy is renewable. Practical energy is limited. And so you choose the easy path of mental transformation while avoiding the difficult path of structural governance. You consume content rather than create containers. You accumulate insights rather than implement systems. But insights without systems leak. Content without containers evaporates. Mental transformation without structural governance is temporary at best, imaginary at worst. You have imagined transformation for years. You have felt transformed after powerful experiences. You have thought yourself transformed after profound insights. You have believed yourself transformed after sincere commitments. But imagination is not transformation. Feeling is not transformation. Thinking is not transformation. Believing is not transformation. Transformation is change that persists beyond the moment of inspiration. Transformation is change that survives the test of ordinary days. Transformation is change that becomes the new normal rather than the temporary exception. And the new normal requires governance to become normal. The new normal needs structure to remain stable. The new normal demands discipline to prevent regression. Without governance, everything reverts. Without structure, everything collapses. Without discipline, everything returns to the path of least resistance. The path of least resistance is not transformation. The path of least resistance is stagnation, disguised as stability. You have been stagnant for years, stagnant while believing you were growing, stagnant while feeling you were changing, stagnant while thinking you were transforming. But stagnation with good intentions is still stagnation. Stagnation with sincere beliefs is still stagnation. Stagnation with powerful feelings is still stagnation. And stagnation is the natural state of the ungoverned life. Stagnation is what happens when seed meets sand. Stagnation is the harvest of governance avoided. You have been avoiding governance while expecting harvest. This is not faith. This is delusion. Faith expects harvest from governed ground. Faith plants seed in structured soil. Faith submits to the disciplines that create the container for power to become productivity. But you do not want to submit to disciplines. You want disciplines to submit to you. You want structure that adapts to your preferences rather than preferences that adapt to structure. This is backwards. This is why nothing changes. This is why the seed remains seed instead of becoming harvest. The seed was never the problem. The soil is the problem. The soil of your ungoverned life cannot contain or sustain the power of what you believe. And until you govern the soil, planting more seed is waste. Until you create structure, accumulating truth is futility. Until you submit to discipline, expecting transformation is fantasy. The diagnosis is complete. The seed is not enough. Belief without governance fails. Your life demonstrates this perfectly. The question is not whether you believe. The question is whether you will govern. The question is not whether you have faith. The question is whether you will structure. The question is not whether you are sincere. The question is whether you will submit. But these are questions you must answer in the practical reality of your daily choices, rather than the theoretical comfort of your spiritual convictions. Because convictions without governance produce nothing except the exhausting cycle of sincere failure you have been living for years. Your soul is the blueprint. Your life is the construction. Shalom, my friend. Now let's build the life God designed for you.